Okay, so get this. Remember just a few years ago when Jack Ma was practically like rubbing elbows with every world leader out there?
Yeah.
And Chinese tech IPOs were making headlines every other week, it seems like?
It felt like a gold rush. Everyone was trying to get in on it.
Right. And now you send me this Financial Times article, and it's like someone slammed on the brakes.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah.
We're talking about a 97% drop in new startups in China between 2018 and 2023.
Wow.
From 51,000, okay, down to just over 1,200.
Wow.
That is a staggering drop. What on earth is going on here?
So it's really interesting. It's actually a really fascinating case study because what we're seeing is bigger than just a slowing economy
Yeah.
or, a tech sector that's maturing. This is about Xi Jinping's government very deliberately reining in these tech giants and emphasizing party control. I mean, it's a pretty clear message, I think.
And speaking of messages, the article quotes Desmond Shum.
Right.
If you don't know him, former real estate tycoon, he wrote this book, Red Roulette. And he basically says that successful entrepreneurs in China right now are walking on eggshells.
Totally.
They're under a microscope. Their money, forget about it, practically considered state property at this point.
It's a chilling thought because, for years, China was the place for venture capital.
Right.
But then when you have someone like Shum who knows the system inside and out saying that, I mean, it gives investors pause.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it play out even sectors like biotech, which the Chinese government sees as strategically important.
Right.
Even they're having a tough time attracting funding.
So it's not even just about the entrepreneurs themselves. It's having these like global ripple effects too.
Absolutely. The confidence of foreign investors has been shaken.
Yeah.
And that has consequences for everyone involved. I mean, it's a situation with incredibly high stakes.
Okay, so the once booming Chinese tech scene is facing some serious challenges. But what does that actually look like on the ground? Like, let's unpack what happens when those high-flying startups, the ones that were supposed to be the next Alibaba, they don't actually make it to IPO. And that brings us to the story of the venture capitalists themselves. And let me tell you, it is a wild ride. Remember all those headlines, right?
Oh.
About VC firms pouring billions into China, promising investors like, the mini fund.
Yeah.
So what happens when all these startups, the ones they bet on, they don't actually go public?
Yeah, that's where things get really, really interesting. The article calls it a wave of failures.
Yeah.
And it's led to this, I don't know, almost like this scramble, this desperation by some VC firms to recoup their investments.
Right.
And they're doing it through something called redemption clauses.
Okay, redemption clauses. Sounds kind of ominous. Break that down for me.
Yeah, so imagine like a safety net for investors, right? If a startup that they backed doesn't go public by a certain date, well, they get their money back.
Uh-huh.
That's essentially what a redemption clause is.
So it's kind of a way for them to like cut their losses when things go south.
Exactly.
Which in this climate seems like a pretty common scenario.
Exactly. And that's where it gets messy because these clauses were very rarely enforced before. The Chinese tech scene was so hot, there were always enough wins to offset the losses. But
Right.
with IPOs drying up, valuations plummeting, I mean, those chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah.
VC firms are under immense pressure to deliver returns,
Yeah.
especially to those state-backed investors that we talked about.
Right.
So they're turning to these clauses. They're going after startups that are probably struggling just to stay afloat themselves.
Totally. And the article even mentions a report from Cakesin, this is a Chinese business publication, that found this major state-owned VC firm, Shenzhen Capital Group, has filed 41 lawsuits this year alone.
Wow.
Mostly against companies that haven't gone public as promised.
Wow.
41 lawsuits.
That's intense.
That's pretty intense, but it gets even wilder, right? Because the article talks about how some firms are resorting to some pretty extreme measures.
It's true. Some firms are replacing like their financial analysts with lawyers.
Really?
And their only job is to claw back these investments. Right. They're going head to head with the same entrepreneurs they once supported. Talk about a hostile work environment.
Wow. What a turnaround. And the founders themselves, they must be like...
They're in a tight spot.
In a really, really tight spot.
Absolutely. Some are being asked to put up their homes as collateral. I mean, they're facing financial ruin. The article even mentions some are like fleeing the country to avoid legal action. A far cry from, those days of billion-dollar valuations and champagne celebrations.
Right.
Yeah.
It really makes you think, with all this pressure, all this uncertainty, what happens to the entrepreneurial spirit in China? Do the big dreams just kind of like fizzle out and disappear? So we've got this situation now where the VC money's drying up, lawsuits are flying around.
Right.
The pressure is definitely on,
Yeah.
It paints a pretty bleak picture, I think, for anyone with a startup dream in China right now.
Yeah.
But is it game over for innovation? Like, is that entrepreneurial spirit completely extinguished?
It's definitely a tougher environment. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
But, I wouldn't count out Chinese entrepreneurs just yet. I
Okay.
mean, this is a culture that is known for its hustle,
Right.
for finding creative solutions, against the odds.
Yeah.
And the article even hints at this, too,
Okay.
talking about how things are shifting, how they're evolving.
So shifting how? Like, what does that actually look like on the ground?
So entrepreneurs are going underground in a way.
Okay.
They're relying more on personal connections for funding,
Right.
bootstrapping their ventures,
Yeah.
and they're looking at sectors that are maybe less capital intensive,
Right.
that fly a little bit more under the radar.
Okay.
The article gave the example of cross-border e-commerce.
Interesting. So leverage China's manufacturing power, but tap into these global markets.
Exactly.
Well,
Build a business without necessarily needing that traditional VC route.
Right.
Of course, even in these, less scrutinized spaces,
Yeah.
there are still challenges.
Well, the article mentioned something about flying cars.
Right.
And, well, the minor detail of China's airspace regulations.
Right. It's almost ironic, right?
Yeah.
You have the government supporting these areas like humanoid robots, these futuristic flying vehicles, which, shows that they are thinking about the future.
Yeah.
But then you remember the reality of actually implementing those technologies in a country like China with, the bureaucracy and the control. Let's just say it's not going to be easy.
It's an understatement, maybe.
Yeah.
So what happens to the venture capitalists themselves in this new landscape?
Right.
Like, are they sticking around, or are they cutting their losses and moving on?
Yeah. I mean, many are adapting,
Good.
just like the entrepreneurs that they once funded, right?
Right.
They're shifting focus. They're sniffing out these new growth areas that we talked about.
Okay.
But the article also points out that some firms are just packing up and heading to markets where the regulations are seen as more stable, more predictable.
So potential brain drain in the VC world, too.
Yeah, it's a real concern. And it's not just about the money leaving either.
Right.
I mean, these venture capitalists, they brought in expertise,
Correct.
global connections,
Yeah.
a whole network that kind of fueled China's tech boom, you know?
Yeah.
Their departure leaves a void that is not going to be easily filled.
No. It's a complex situation for sure.
It is.
And I think the FT article does a good job at not shying away from, like, the human impact of all these shifts.
Yeah.
It actually ends with this really striking image of venture capitalist comparing himself to the captain of the Titanic,
Wow.
going down with the ship.
Yeah, a little dramatic maybe.
A little bit.
But it does, highlight the uncertainty
Yeah.
and the sense of loss that a lot of people in this industry are feeling right now.
Whatever happens next, it's the end of an era. That much is certain.
So where do we go from here? Is this truly the end of Chinese venture capital as we knew it?
Yeah.
Or will it reemerge in some new form, shaped by this period of intense scrutiny and control?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's one that'll be debated and analyzed for years to come.
Yeah.
But one thing is for sure, understanding these shifts,
Yeah.
the forces at play, both within China and globally,
Uh-huh.
it's essential for anyone who wants to really understand the future of tech and innovation.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that even in the fast-paced world of tech,
Right.
the only constant is change.
Terry.
And knowing how to navigate that change, that's what separates the players from the spectators,
Thanks for diving into this with me. It's been enlightening.
You got it. Always a pleasure to unpack these complex topics with you.